They call me the teacher of righteousness. I am the leader and founder of a movement that has come to be called the Essenes. We are an exclusive group of pious Israelites, and we have produced and laboriously copied an entire library of parchment scrolls. They contain elaborate visions of wayward angels coming to earth and cohabiting with human women to produce a race of flesh-eating giants. They contain visions of the end of days and a supernatural temple, which will one day replace the defiled sanctuary currently overseen by a corrupt priesthood. We are currently scattered across the length and breadth of the Holy Land, but one day we will reign as supreme overlords over all that is righteous and just.
Long ago, sheets of parchment, inscribed by learned sages, were rolled into scrolls, to be read and studied only by a select few. For reasons still unknown to us, they were hidden in mountainous desert caves. Then, on a fateful day in 1947, when an Arab lad was searching for his lost goat, he stumbled upon what was to become the most important archaeological find of the 20th century: ancient texts depicting the life and hopes of an unknown Jewish sect. They are known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Their authors are most often identified as a cultic sort of group known by the ancient Jewish historian Josephus as the Essenes.
The Essenes are Jews by birth and seem to have a greater affection for one another than the other sects have. These Essenes reject pleasures as an evil, but esteem abstinence and the conquest over our passions to be virtue. These men despise riches and hold their property in common as raises our admiration. Nor is there any one to be found among them who has more than another, for it is a law among them that those who come to them must let what they have be common to the whole order. They have no one city, but many of them dwell in every city, and if any man of their sect arrives from other places, they welcome him as their own.
In order to understand who we ancient Essenes really were, we have to go back far earlier in time, when our people were conquered by the Babylonian Empire. In an incredible vision, the heavens were opened to a young Israelite prophet, living in lonely exile on the banks of a canal in the great city of Babylon. His name was Ezekiel, and the strange encounters he described have captivated all of my people.
The heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud, with brightness round about it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming bronze. And from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. Now as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel upon the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the 4 of them. As for the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like the gleaming of a chrysolite, and the 4 had the same likeness, their construction being as it were, a wheel within a wheel. When they went in any of their 4 directions without turning as they went. The 4 wheels had rims and they had spokes, and their rims were full of eyes round about. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them, and when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, and the wheels rose along with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Over the heads of the living creatures there was the likeness of a firmament, shining like crystal, spread out above their heads. And above the firmament over their heads there was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness as it were, of a human form. And upward from what had the appearance of his loins I saw as it were, gleaming bronze, like the appearance of fire enclosed round about, and downward from what had the appearance of his loins I saw as it were, the appearance of fire, and there was brightness round about him. Like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about.
Make no mistake, this book of Ezekiel was more than just a rambling series of visions. It opened the door to 2 competing priestly movements, bitterly opposed to one another, and inadvertently giving birth to various competing movements, including the mysterious Enochians, also known as the Essenes, and various messianic sects, including followers of the Galilean prophet Jesus of Nazareth. But who was this Ezekiel? What were his roots? First and foremost, he was an Israelite priest who lived during a most tumultuous time. For the kingdom of Judah, with its capital Jerusalem, had been eliminated by the Babylonian Empire under King Nebuchadnezzar. Jerusalem surrendered, but local resistance continued, culminating in the complete destruction of the city after a long siege. Many members of the Israelite ruling class, including Ezekiel, were deported to Babylonia. Prior to this calamity, Ezekiel had been attached to the Jerusalem temple's priestly staff. He was not only a priest, but a member of the priestly family of Zadok, known as the Zadokites.
My name is Joshua. I was the first high priest after the Babylonian exile, as prophesied by Ezekiel. In my day, the high priests were all descendants of Zadok, a priest who lived in the time of King David. It was the high priest Zadok who was designated to anoint King Solomon, making him the inheritor of David's throne. Zadok was the first high priest in Solomon's temple, and his descendants remained faithful to God while the rest of the nation rebelled. As staunch opponents of paganism, we as a family line of priests are to perform the main sacrificial services, including animal sacrifices and organizing the showbread. We are to wear linen garments when entering the inner court of the temple. We are to serve as judges in any dispute. When it comes to family life, we are not to marry widows or divorced women, only virgins of Israelite descent or widows of priests. We have no land or special portion, but instead God alone is our inheritance, and that is the richest inheritance of all. Moreover, Ezekiel declared that the high priest must be a descendant of Zadok.
The Levitical priests descended from Zadok, who maintained the service of my sanctuary when the people of Israel went astray from me. They are the ones who shall approach me to minister to me, they shall stand before me to offer me fat and blood, declares the sovereign God.
As if in fulfillment of Ezekiel's vision, the Jerusalem temple, destroyed by the Babylonians, was rebuilt after 70 long years of exile. Obviously, the new Jerusalem priesthood, now dominated by those of Zadokite stock, were more than happy to point to Ezekiel for their legitimacy. For them, the restoration of the new Second Temple was the culmination of all their hopes and dreams. Even if, by the time the exiles returned, the land of Israel was no more than a colony of the Persian Empire, which had come to exercise hegemony over the entire region. As far as they were concerned, God's divine order had been restored. Of course we, the opposition Essenes, of which I am the leader, were of a different opinion. But who were we when political power resided with the high priest of those days, a man named Ezra?
You may call me Ezra. I am a Jewish scribe and priest, a descendant of Sariah, the last high priest to serve in the First Temple, and a close relative of Joshua, the first high priest of the Second Temple. I was the second of 3 leaders to leave Babylon for the reconstruction of Jerusalem. Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple, Nehemiah rebuilt the walls, and I restored the worship and reintroduced the Torah in Jerusalem. As for our worldview, we see creation as a process, from past disorder to current divine order. As long as humans do not trespass God's boundaries, evil and impurity are controllable. Consequently, the spread of evil and impurity depend on human choice. Yet, even though gradually, divine order has come about, through my own efforts and those of the governor appointed by the Persians, Nehemiah.
But Ezekiel, with his mystical visions, laid the groundwork for another branch of Judaism, to which I belong. Of priestly roots, but in deep tension with the prevailing temple leadership, the Zadokites.
As a priest myself, I can speak of another priestly line, of which I am a member. My name is not important, but what I represent is in our eyes much more profound. We also take our inspiration from Ezekiel, who, like us, was a priest in exile. We were the ones who kept the temple rituals alive in Jerusalem, even after the temple was destroyed, even after the elite Zadokite line had been deported to Babylon. But when they returned, we were shoved aside, exiled as it were, as they took control of the rebuilt Second Temple.
There were many and sundry disputes among what amounted to two warring factions among the priesthood, and we Enochians, referred to by historians of our day as Essenes, charged the Zadokite priesthood, not only with corruption, but being lackeys of a foreign power, the Persians.
How can you call yourselves legitimate priests? On the contrary, you are corrupt priests, presiding over a corrupt temple built in league with corrupt foreign overlords. You say you are descended from the high priest, Aaron, Moses' brother, but we trace our own lineage back to Moses himself through the high priest appointed by King David, Abiathar. Our claim is far stronger than yours.
Our authority is benign, and as I oversaw the redaction of our Torah, I brought stability to our people and our faith. And when we read the prophet Ezekiel's vision of the valley of the dry bones, we see nothing less than a metaphor, not for the dead coming back to life, but for our national revival.
God's hand came upon me. I was taken out by the Spirit of God and set down in the valley. It was full of bones. God led me all around them. There were very many of them spread over the valley, and they were very dry. And I was told, prophesy over these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of God. Thus said the sovereign God to these bones, I will cause breath to enter you and you shall live again.
It seems that somewhere along the line, around the turn of the 4th century before the Common Era, the resistance to the Zadokites coalesced as an opposition party within the Jerusalem priesthood.
Our entire focus was different. We were obsessed with the ancient biblical patriarch, the seventh in line from Adam, known as Enoch. We have no patience with the Zadokites, believing that this new Second Temple, constructed under the sovereignty of a foreign land, the Persians, had no validity. God alone must restore our independence and our temple at the end of days. We began to write down our visions, which were rooted in the texts, some call it mythology, of early Israel, long before the Babylonian exile.
They would go on to record scores of mystical visions in a series of books that were systematically banned from the Bible. Books like Enoch and Jubilees, among many others. Books uncannily preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls.
We wrote of the renewal of the earth, of God creating a garden of paradise, placing guards of angels, and commanding the creation of great lamps in the heavens. We wrote of 10 heavens, including the first heaven, where angels control the weather, and the second heaven, where rebel angels are imprisoned and tortured. We wrote of the fate of the human soul, divine secrets, and Enoch's ascent into the heavenly realm, being transformed into the angel Metatron.
But all of this was against the backdrop of tension with that other line of priests, the Zadokite priests, who insisted that their way was the only way. There's so much more to come.